And we're back now with our political panel for some analysis on a week we're still reeling from in many ways. Ben, we haven't even talked about the fact that Speaker Ryan decided on a timeline that surprised many to step away from public life and go home to Wisconsin. The timing surprised many people. What does this do to the horse race?
Well, in terms of the horse race, I don't think it changes it all that much. It's certainly a sign, though, that Speaker Ryan was not that optimistic that the November would be very good for House Republicans. The race to replace him looks to be pretty decidedly in favor of Kevin McCarthy, but that's something that could definitely be for the minority leader position as opposed to the Speaker of the House after November. Ryan leaving is really a tale of a politician who had a moment in time when everyone in Washington thought that he was going to be the next clean-cut, wonky leader of the Republican coalition for decades to come.
You call him a young gun.
Yes. Well, that was his branding at the time, along with the departed Eric Cantor and McCarthy himself. It was one of those things, though, where I think that Ryan was very much, as much as he was a significant player in terms of charting the policy future for the GOP from the sort of post-Obama moment on, he was also someone who was out of step, I think, increasingly with the culture warrior mindset of a lot of the Republican base. And his focus on telling stories through histograms and through Excel sheets was not something that actually connected with the Republican base in a way that would allow
is that marketing, or is that actually the death of fiscal conservatism? I mean, you had Bob Corker, the senator, out there saying that, you know, this Congress and this administration are going to go down as one of the most fiscally irresponsible in history.
Right. Yeah, fiscal conservatism, I think, is dead until the point when a Democrat returns to the White House and may disagree.
And maybe, I mean, look, he accomplished all he could, and I think he knew that at this point it's only going to get worse for him. Usually in the modern era, speakers don't get to leave on their own terms. By doing it now, that far out, he essentially gets to set the table for his departure, and by anointing his preferred successor, sort of leaves it to Republicans to say, you will sort this out later. But I think he's correct in saying that whoever is in charge of the Republican conference will have no bearing on results in November. And the message he kept sending, I think, to his colleagues was, get out there and win your race. Do everything you need to do to get reelected. And if you can't do it, well, you know, that's on you. The headwinds are certainly not in the, you know, they're going against Republicans, and it's going to be a bad year for them, it looks like, if you believe the forecasting. And he knows that. But we should also give him some credit. He's been in Congress for 20 years. He's only 48, so think about that, 28-year-old. All of his kids have been born since he got into Congress. Family considerations were a legitimate part of this. I think, you know, that is true. But again, he gets to do what so few speakers have done in the last 30, 40 years, and that is get out when he can.
Well, but you did hear some angst. I heard some angst from some Republicans on the Hill that he was leaving right now and not after the election. Right. And he was asked about that, and he said it would have felt dishonest for him to know he was going to step down. But there was this feeling that he was sort of the general abandoning his troops in the middle of a fight. And so I think that's part of the reason he rushed to anoint McCarthy, was to prevent there being a very messy leadership fight in the middle of a very difficult election cycle for Republicans. And
isn't that clean, or will the Freedom Caucus have their say in this? Is Kevin McCarthy, does he have this on lock?
I don't know, but I think probably so. I think, you know, with Ryan, if Trump goes along with this, and Trump likes McCarthy very much, and we believe that McCarthy is probably Trump's preferred speaker, you know, McCarthy had problems last time. There were doubts about his ability to lead, but I think things have changed a lot since then, and what was a very difficult job for Paul Ryan might actually be an easier job for McCarthy, because we won't have this Hamlet act with regard to Trump. Right? Ryan was so clearly always fighting his own demons, and he was getting asked in every press conference to, you know, this hand-wringing about Trump. It was very clear that he didn't like the guy, but that he had to be allies with the guy. McCarthy's been buddies with Trump from the beginning, and to the extent that, you know, Republicans in Congress basically want to do whatever Trump wants them to do, I think that'll be much easier for McCarthy to bring them together around
the
that.
benefits of being a Californian instead of a Midwesterner.
And yet I think Ed's right. The message, part of the message that Paul Ryan is sending is, save yourself. Don't wait for the president to save you.
Are there more Republican departures? I mean,
there are what? I
damaging
think
is
there's
this?
19 states that haven't had their filing deadlines yet. In the wake of the Speaker's decision, a guy named Dennis Ross from Florida announced he too was retiring. You ask Democrats, they've got a list of about another 24 that could conceivably do it. We'll see if they do. You know, the Democrats need to come up with 23 seats to retake it. Looks like at this point perhaps they could do that. Question will be whether they get many more after that. And backfilling retirements, resignations, promotions for Republicans is a big part of their problem. Ryan being Exhibit A at this point, there's some forecasting now that thinks that his seat is in play.
Margaret, one of the things that's been uncomfortable for some Senate Republicans, particularly from states that produce agricultural products, the president's announcements on tariffs. Then this week you had him, after this meeting with some senators from those states, say, well, let's take another look at the Asia-Pacific trade deal that he had already said he was going to exit. Yeah. They took that as a sign of hope. The president then tweeted the next day, a little bit of a walk back. Is this just to settle the room? Is this a policy shift? I mean, what does the president walk into this meeting with the Japanese prime minister this week and tell him his position is on TPP?
Yeah, this is a truly fascinating new turn. The president has hinted for some months that there was some potential in theory to talk about reentering the TPP, but it seemed that he had taken it to a new level this week. He emerged from that meeting with Midwestern leaders. Ben Sasse made it a point to lay down a marker and say he told Lighthizer and Larry Kudlow, he tapped them to figure out if and how we should reenter the TPP. And I think Sasse put down that marker on purpose to put it out there. But here's what's happened. Getting out of the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, was one of the first things President Trump did in office. The tariff thing has not played well on the stock market and has not played well with some of the Trump voters, some of the Trump base. And this seems to be a testing, a floating of the idea of reentering. Everyone in the TPP says they would welcome the U.S. back, but many
don't want to renegotiate.
Many in the TPP says the terms are set. You guys missed your window. We are not cracking this thing open, but we think it's good for you and good for the rest of the world and good for, to some extent, countering China to have the U.S. back in. And now the president has a real decision to make.
The president ran in 2016 on a platform that sounded frequently protectionist and isolationist. The fact is that as president, his policies have not been as protectionist or isolationist as you might have predicted based on what he was saying at the time. I think this is another example of how he kind of wants to play both sides of these things. He likes the idea of protectionism and tariffs in certain respects, but he really doesn't like the idea of Wall Street's reaction to that.
All right. Thank you very much to all of you. We'll be back in a moment to talk about what's next for the U.S. in Syria.